Hello and welcome to Pathways Through the Prairie, where we interview North Dakota librarians and library staff, state agency leaders and employees, and interesting North Dakotans. I'm State Librarian Mary Soucie, and today I am joined by Brenna Gerhardt. Brenna is the Executive Director of Humanities North Dakota. She joined the Humanities North Dakota in '05 and has been Executive Director since '08. Thank you for joining me today, Brenna.
Thank you so much for having me, Mary.
Excited to learn more about your organization. I think I've known you since shortly after I started at the State Library in 2014. I wasn't here very long when you reached out to me and talked about some partnerships. And so we've worked together for a while, but I'm super excited to learn more about you and about your awesome organization. And so before we dive into the normal questions that we have on the podcast, Brenna, I was reading your newsletter. I think it was the last newsletter that came out
Mhm. Mhm.
and talked about that Humanities North Dakota is changing its name. Do you want to share what the new name will be and a little bit about the thoughts behind the change?
Yeah, so we're rebranding as The Study. Our website will be thestudyn.org. And we decided to drop the name Humanities from our title because no one, I shouldn't say no one, we have groupies. There are people that know what the humanities are, but largely the general public doesn't know what that means. And so they were thinking that we were a humane society. We got some calls about that. A lot of people thought that we were a human resource organization. I mean, that was a pretty common misconception, and they would reach out for those reasons. And those are not the things that we do. And so we just thought if our mission is truly lifelong learning in the humanities, and we can't get people to come through the door because they don't know what we do or what the humanities are, maybe we need to remove that stumbling block. We're not going to change what we do at all. We're still going to do lifelong learning in the humanities with our classes and events, but we hope that we can then educate people after they come through the door for a history class or for a book talk or something like that. So we really felt that the branding that we had previously made it harder for us to fulfill our mission.
Gotcha. Are you keeping the same logo? Because I love your logo.
No, we're gonna have a lamp. So the light
Okay.
bulb will go in the lamp. So we're kind of stay true to that.
Ooh,
But it's
cool.
the idea is that you curate your own study practice. It could be
Okay.
online classes, it could be study clubs, it could just be going to lectures. But our new tagline is room for thought and room for you. So we wanted people to think about it like a study in your
Ooh.
home that you curate, you lay it out the way that you need it laid out. And so we want people to do that with all of our programs. We offer a ton of different programs, but we want people to be able to engage with us to meet their needs, their schedule.
Mm,
People are super, super busy. That's really
right.
important. And that they're in the driver's seat, and that's really important to us.
Gotcha. I love that new tagline. Oh, that's
Thank
awesome.
you. Oh, I
And
knew a librarian would love that. Yes.
I'm glad that you're keeping your light bulb. We're working on a new logo here.
Okay.
And so I was talking with our marketing specialist and I was sharing logos that I like. And of course, we are about knowledge as well, but how
Mhm.
do you incorporate knowledge into a logo? And I said, well, this is how you do it. You put
Yeah.
thoughts inside a light bulb, but you guys already had that, so
Oh,
we
well,
can't
I
take it
mean,
from you. But you
you could
know,
steal it now.
we
Now's the chance, Mary.
I might share that with our marketing person. But so for people who don't know, you said a lot of people don't know what the humanities are. What are studies in the humanities? What topics or what subjects, what areas?
Yeah, I mean, it's really the study of what it means to be human. So it could be the study of religion, history, philosophy, literature, it's the social sciences. I mean, it can also be behavioral economics. It's really just how do we find meaning and purpose in our lives, and how do we order our societies? Government, civics is a humanities discipline. It's really the soft sciences, if you
Hmm.
will, that are the study of the humanities.
And that we need to really spend a lot of time in today.
Yeah, almost all of our problems are complex social issues, and they're not going to be solved with science or technology. They can be tools that we can certainly use, uh,
Hmm.
but unfortunately, the arts and the humanities, as you know, are very underfunded, disregarded. They've been siloed and kind of jettisoned in many regards. but we need them now more than ever. I just listened to a different podcast yesterday, just about the dehumanization that it's happening with the advent and the rise of technology, and what that's doing to us, to our shared humanity. And just, this was a call, and these are by computer scientists. These are by the tech people making this technology, saying,
Right.
we have a problem. We maybe need to slow down. But who are asking those questions? The humanists, those scholars. And so it's heartening to hear people in those sectors saying, hey, we need more humanities, but it's also disheartening that we've reached a point where that infrastructure, that intellectual infrastructure, has really been dismantled to a great degree.
Yeah, absolutely. So we'll jump into some of our quote unquote normal questions. I have a feeling we're going to end up circling back to this as well, though. And,
Okay.
I'll share with you, AI is artificial intelligence, has been around for a long time in many different ways. It's just the current AI, the generative models, that people don't know what to do with. And so I'm going to a new hairstylist tonight for the first time because my hairstylist is on maternity leave. And so I'm like, what do I want to do with my hair? And so I found this program for like $15. I generated 30 AI hairstyles.
Yeah.
Oh my goodness. Hilarious. And we have determined that I should not have long hair, which I've never had anyway, but it was so funny. And so there's these simple, innocent uses of AI, but then there's all these other uses of AI. And what people don't realize is the more information we feed into it, the more information that gets spit out, but not in the way we intended, because we ask a simple question and AI just sucks that information in, and it becomes part of the AI learning as well. And so, like, from a librarian's perspective, one of our big concerns with the technology is not only the dehumanization, but also the copyright and the intellectual, the intellectual thievery that's happening right now. I think we could talk about the technology and all the different ways that it's impacting our humanity that we don't even think about.
Yeah, I mean, and that's just the tip of the iceberg, not only stealing things, but I mean, there's chatbots that have convinced teenagers to commit suicide. I mean, there are serious implications. These things, even driverless cars, like who gets sued when the car runs over? Like how do you program that to make moral decisions? And we know that this is here and it is a tool. I don't think it's an evil tool, but I think it is just a tool. But I also think that we haven't spent enough time asking, should we? We just are like, I mean, America is such a rule breaking society, and we love limits and we love boundaries because we just like to smash right through them, right? But I don't think we have a really contemplative society, a society that likes to slow down, to think deeply. And that's what libraries want us to do. I mean, there's spaces for that, right? Room for thought, room for that. I'm describing a library as well as a study. And we want people to really contemplate these ideas, to think ethically, to think morally, to have that compass, and to look back on wisdom from the past, ways to guide. And the problem with AI is that it's not baked into that system. It's not designed to do that. It's not designed to think like that. And I think, to me, that is the problem. And I think designing society around human beings and quality of life and strong moral compasses is the society that I want to live in. Not necessarily the society that, I mean, there are people that are making the decisions, that are designing these things, that are putting together these algorithms, that are making decisions that have profound consequences and affect our lives. And we have no idea what those are. And we've seen the effects on our children already. And I'm happy that schools are like, no, you can't have your iPhone on you. But all of their learning is done, like from my son's kindergarten, he got issued a computer, he got issued a screen. And I was like, or books that don't operate like scrolls, like I have spatial memory. I write in I purchase them. I don't write in library books. I just want that out there. It's not me, but I write in these books. And I underline and I make notes and I go back and I know where things are kind of spatially in those things. And that's just it's a tactile and positive experience that I think changes the way that I learn and ingest information. So that's just a little tiny. I think, are we thinking about that as we're designing these systems and these things? I'd be curious, Mary, like, what other concerns do libraries have? How is this affect either making your work easier and better and helping you serve people, or like what keeps you up at night when you think about the machine?
I just read I think it was a blog post, those still exist, earlier today, related to vendors in the library world and how much power we've given them to curate the resources, especially in academic libraries, where the vendors for our online resources pull all these resources together. And now they're starting to incorporate AI, and you don't have an option. It's just baked into their software. And so I like to say, it's not my quote, but it is one of my favorites. And if I could attribute it to the person whose quote it is, I would do that. Google will bring you a million hits, libraries will bring you the right hit. I feel like the study is the same way, right? AI can bring us a lot of answers. They can't bring you the same answer twice. That's another concern for me, is the fact that I can put the same question into two different AI tools or into the same AI tools different times and not generate the same answer. It's in the AI world, they call it hallucinations. If AI can't find an answer, it creates one. But also, again, for me, what's your source? Where's that answer coming from? I think the humanities, folks who are steeped in the study of humans, also want to know where the source is, that thought process that's going, that goes into the answer. I think for me personally, I do a lot of volunteering with middle school kids. I teach a seventh grade faith formation class at our church. I help with the sixth, seventh, and eighth grade youth ministry. And then I teach a fourth and fifth grade class as well. And I am the rare bird who loves middle school kids. I think it's such a fun time. They are finally starting to have their own opinions and thoughts and not just parroting, what they've heard mom and dad say. And in high school as well. I love that formation of the human being. There really is a conversational loss. Watching it with kids in college, who went through high school through the pandemic and lost a whole year or 2 years of schooling, where a lot of these skills that we learned without knowing we were learning, right? And kids aren't being given those opportunities to explore and to learn. And I think the other thing that keeps me up, Brenna, is the lack of attention spans. We learn now in, a minute snippet or less. The My husband and so I'm from the Chicagoland area, and there's a really great AM news radio station in the Chicagoland area. I love it. Whenever we go back home, if I'm the one driving and controlling the radio, I am on 780, WBBM 780. And we were flying back. It was 2 weeks ago when all the airline stuff was going on, and they were starting to, embargo flights. And there's two airports in Chicago. And so we're on our way to the airport, and I heard there was a ground stop at O'Hare, and we were flying out of Midway. And so I was like, okay, tell me more. What's going on? That was the whole news snippet. It said more information to come. And they just repeated that again. 15-minute ground stop at O'Hare. It should be over at this time. Before I moved here 11 years ago, that would have been several minutes of a news story.
Yeah.
Right. And it would have been expanded on. And so that concerns me, who's generating our news. So much of the news now is biased one side or the other. Finding neutral, honest to goodness news is work. And there's
Mhm.
a whole generation of people who didn't grow up. I didn't really grow up with Walter Cronkite,
Mm.
but I know who he was.
Yeah.
When
Yeah.
someone says, "Man, I miss the Walter Cronkite era," I know
Mhm.
what that means. We
Yeah.
have a whole generation of people who don't know what that means. And so they just take what's put out on social
Mhm.
media and say, "Oh, this must be factual," when it's not. And so that was a very long answer to your short question of what about this keeps me up at night.
Yeah. And I mean, the answers to all those things are in the humanities, right? I mean, we call it lifelong learning. It is slow, it is deliberate, it is painstaking in many ways because it's
Mhm.
the opposite of everything you just described. There are no quick answers. Actually, the best thing, what we say is it's about good questions. It's not necessarily about the answers that you arrive at. It's about asking those
Mhm.
good, because the answers you get, kind of like even AI, is are you putting in really good questions? Do you know what to ask? Do you know what to push back on? Do you know where to find the information? Because I often worry about that too. Kids say, my own kids, like, well, it was on the internet. Yeah, I trust it the least amount if you found it on the internet. Like, where's the primary source? Let's go back to the source and let's look at that. And I mean, that takes work,
Mhm.
right? And we live
Right.
in a fast-paced society. We have everyone convinced that they're too busy to take the time to learn, to take the time to dig in
Mhm.
a bit deeper. But if we're going to have a functioning democracy, we need thoughtful and informed citizens, engaged in this
Mhm.
experiment. We need library patrons. We need people who are in those roles. And we've just moved so
Mhm.
we don't prioritize that. We don't prioritize it. We
We
don't put
don't.
resources in
Yeah.
those directions. There's just so many things pulling us away from those things. And again, when it comes to deeper meaning and purpose, I mean, is that not the point of life? Isn't that what it means to be human? To me, those are things that we really, more than data centers and these things, we should be investing in because I mean, you can't. The other problem with this, and maybe libraries have this too, how do you measure the impact you're having? How do you measure the change that you're having? Like for us, I'm always like, I could maybe give someone a test before and after a class, but that's really not measuring what I'm seeking out or what I'm trying to do here. I'm trying
Right.
to get people to think bigger, more meaningfully. I mean, I'm not doing a do you know this much data or not know this much data. That's not what it is. It's
Mhm.
grappling with deep moral questions, grappling with the timeless questions that people have. It's grappling with meaning and how do you measure that? And we live in such a data-driven society where everyone wants that data piece. If I apply for grants, they're like, well, show me how you're making change, and it better be quick, and it better be, and I'm like, we are the opposite
Mhm.
of
Yep.
all of those things, which is just bizarre to me, Mary, that we are like countercultural here. Look at it, because I like think of myself as a pretty straight laced, boring gal. Like I love reading books and going to church as you do, and now I'm going like, stop, no, like let's think about this a little bit first. Like, what a weird
Right.
world to wake
Mhm.
up in. I don't know if you
Right.
feel that way.
Oh, I've said it so often. There's a Chinese curse that says, "May you live in interesting times," and I have said so much in the last 3 or 4 years. I wish the curse would lift. I've got enough. I've got enough interesting times. Let me go back to my
Yeah,
boring existence where
yeah.
all I was worrying about was, how do I get through this book and keep my house clean, or whatever. And that busyness, I think you hit the nail on the head. We have lost the ability to just sit in silence and look around us and
Mhm.
appreciate uh, just all of the beauty around us. I
Mhm.
think I do think we have that more in North Dakota than in some states. I do think in North Dakota, because we have to in the winter, we slow down. Right? We we sit we sit in the blankets in front of the fireplace, and hopefully we're reading a book as we're drinking our hot cocoa or whatever. But I think one of the things that your agency had to learn, as did our libraries, um, and something I think you've done very well, and your agency has been really leading the country, is that post-pandemic shift where all of a
Mm.
sudden everything you did was in person and now everything has to be online. How has that impacted, the way that people interact with your agency?
Yeah, I mean, talk about a learning curve and using technology to our advantage, right? We realized that, yeah, we had to fundamentally shift because I was anti online. I really was. I was like, I want people to be together. I want them to be in person. I want them to be in community. I want them to have that third space. And then during the pandemic, we're like, well, everyone's locked in home and they're learning how to use Zoom. If my parents can learn how to use Zoom on their iPad to talk to their grandkids, like, oh, okay, we have something here. So we took advantage of that. And we're like, you know what, we always ask, what does this make possible? Every catastrophe, every situation, like there's always a possibility there somewhere. And that's just how you need to think creatively in the work that we do. So what does make possible? And we're like, we can use a scholar from anywhere in the world and they can connect with a North Dakota audience, right? Live, like we record a lot of our events, but you have the opportunity to be there to ask them questions, to interact with them. So we did that. And now our challenge, Mary, is really how do we balance that out with the in person? Because to me, that is still absolutely critical, face to face, not just behind a screen.
Mhm.
I agree with you. Like, we don't want to be part of perpetuating a problem, but we also want to take advantage of opportunities that we have. So we are implementing something called study clubs. And that's an old idea. That's not a new idea. It's like a book club. There used to be study clubs all over the U.S. You mail in correspondence courses, get materials. We want them to interact. They could take an online class. They could go to a Brave conversation, a book talk, whatever it is, one of our civics education initiatives. But then to meet on a monthly, weekly, whatever they decide. Again, they curate it, but to get together in person to talk about what they're learning, to grapple with some of these questions, to really dig in a little bit deeper. So our challenge now is balancing out the in person and the online, and I think that's
Mhm.
kind of the great challenge of society is where do we draw that line with our technology? And there needs to be a line, and I just don't think we're encouraged to ask where's the line, how much is enough, how can this be a
Mhm.
useful tool to my goals, what are my goals, what do I want out of life, and how does technology play a role in supporting that instead of being just an end of its own? Because like
Mhm.
I had to delete all social media off my phone because I would just go on Facebook because that's how I found out about events in town, and I would get stuck. Like like I would be horrified. Like I just wasted half an hour, and I just went on there to find out
Mhm.
where this event was.
Mhm.
And so, yeah, I do still believe that the in-person aspect of that is important, but I also believe the small intimate groups are the way to go, and to teach people, like, we don't know how to have civil conversations, not just conversations, because I agree that that's an art, a skill that I hope kids get, but I do think that they're losing it. But even for us adults, how to have a
Mhm.
civil conversation on hard topics. We're facing a lot of hard things, but how to be in community. Community's messy.
Mhm.
We need to care about people we disagree with. I think
Yes.
those are all important things. And we really hope that study clubs and libraries are great places to host study clubs. Because to me, a library is a safe, good space it's about books and it's about knowledge and it's not about ideology and it's not about politics, but you can research those things there. Things also aren't off limits there. So we want
Right.
we want to curate those space, help people curate those spaces so that they
Mm.
can do the messy work of community.
I love that. Oh my gosh, that's so brilliant. The messy work of community, because it really is. I think of my friend Jackie. Jackie and I met many years ago. We were in college together, and we are opposite politically. We're
Mm-hmm.
opposite philosophically. We are opposite when it comes to a lot of the social justice issues. Not as opposite as we probably were when we met years ago, but you know, but we but all of these years we have been disagreeing with each other for
Yeah.
decades.
Mhm.
And then at the end of the conversation, it's like, girlfriend, I love you. hug it out virtually because she still lives in Chicago. But
Yeah.
it's that civic discourse, that civic
Mhm.
discourse
Mhm.
that
Mhm.
I grew up with,
Yeah.
and we don't have that, and we need that back. We need to be having it around our dinner table.
Yeah.
We need to sit down with our family at the dinner table, not just rush through the drive-through. And we do it as well. My husband and I are doing the cook from your pantry and fridge challenge.
Oh,
This month
nice.
where you
Okay.
don't grocery shop.
Yeah.
I've discovered I really like to eat out. you know, but and my husband and I are empty nesters, so it's easy for us, whether it's at our table at home or at a table at a restaurant, to have that discourse. But as a society, we've lost that as well because of our
Mhm.
busyness.
Mhm. Mhm.
We don't know how to sit around the dinner table anymore either. And so I love that that's what your organization focuses
Yeah.
on. It's not that you're trying to take us back to a time and place. You don't want us to move backwards, but
No.
but you're trying to get us to remember what was good about that time and how do we
Mhm.
utilize that in
Yeah.
2025.
Yeah. How do we want to build our lives? How do we want to build our societies? It's something we should always be asking ourselves. And what worked in the past and what brought
Mm-hmm.
people together. And I think about Tocqueville, who said the great thing about America is their voluntary associations, And I remember when I was in college at Concordia, servant leadership was something that they drilled into us. And we went and listened to Robert Putnam, Bowling Alone. He talked about how people weren't joining things, they weren't coming together. And I really took that to heart. And I'm not going to tell you when that was, Mary, but joined Rotary. I joined Rotary specifically for that because I wanted to do service projects and I wanted to be with
Mm.
people that I didn't necessarily agree with. And I joined a PEO club. And they're like your friend, there are people in there that we have very different ideologies and views, and I love them. I care about them. And they can say things that I'm like, oh, dear Lord, just no. Uh, but I love serving with them at the pumpkin patch. I love the wrestling tournament we do together. I love our exchange program that we support and do together. And I love them as people. We sit down, we have lunch once a week, we talk about things. It doesn't mean that I don't ever get upset with them and wonder, like, how can you think that way, or on different topics that I care deeply about and they may diverge. But I care about them. We keep showing up and I can understand why they think the way they do. Because if I ask them and I can repeat to them what they believe and say, is this right? Is this, because sometimes I don't have it right and I don't understand. But if I can do that with them and say, okay, I hear you, this is where you land on this. Let me make sure I understand you. So I'm just going to tell you and tell me if I'm right. And sometimes they'll be like, no, I think you missed this piece or this piece. But just knowing that also takes a lot of the fear out of things, because I
Mm-hmm.
think the temperature right now is full of fear, it's full of anger, it's full of hatred. It's just gross. And we're all in this community together. And so when you sit with someone and you understand, it's really that understanding piece, which takes time. It takes time to build community, to build enough trust, to have some of those
Mm-hmm.
conversations. But I want people to join more. I know we're busy, and I'm not saying to join it to be busier, but when I leave something like that, my cup is full. When I go to something, when I go to a good church service, when I go to a study club event, and just have a good conversation, a good dinner party, with your good friend. You didn't think you had time to do it, but you did it, and then the world kind of does slow down. Do you ever
Mm-hmm.
feel that way?
Absolutely. Yep. I was recently I was invited to one of the local Lions clubs to talk about the state
Mm,
library.
yeah.
And when I left, I was talking with my friend. He's a state employee who had invited me to present. And I said, when I was in the public library, I did a lot of civic
Mm,
volunteering.
mhm,
Now I'm doing a lot of faith-based volunteering, and I
mm,
love that, but I miss civic or community volunteering. And I travel a lot for my job. I know you do as well. And so I've been trying to figure out how do I fit that in to my schedule,
mm,
and maybe it's accepting that I can't be the perfect volunteer who's there all the
mm,
time. I can be there when I can be there, right? And I think I I love that your new tagline. But I think maybe another something you need to work in somewhere, Brenna, is uh, changing the world one conversation at a time, because
Mm,
that's what you guys are doing, right?
yeah.
You're changing the world one conversation at a time, and I love that.
Yeah, thank you. I mean, we're patient. I think that's one virtue, as you said, about being in North Dakota. you, you know that winter will eventually end, right? Just be patient, do the work, and that's certainly something that I think about a lot. Um,
Yeah.
yes, Matt, we need to talk to each other, and we need to talk to each other. I just think there's been a coarsening of discourse. Um, across the board, and it so
Mhm.
disappoints me because we teach our children not to bully. We teach our children to have respect for other people. You never know what someone else is going through. Be kind. Kindness doesn't cost you anything. Just please be kind. Although it can be hard to be kind. It's not easy to be kind, but please just be kind. And so, like, just modeling those things, I think, is so
Mhm.
important. But it
Yeah.
really does break my heart, the way we've allowed public discourse to just degenerate to
Mhm.
it's just gross, and we deserve better, and we need to demand better. We need to hold
Mhm.
ourselves accountable to a higher standard, and we need to just hold our elected officials and other people in leadership positions up to a higher standard.
Yes.
Because if we don't, that's not going to change, because the quality of conversation matters. And one of our core values at Humanities North Dakota is good faith engagement, that you're always believing the best in the person across from you.
Mhm.
I think that's something we also need to remember.
Mhm.
There's so many good people out there trying to do good things, to
Mhm.
be good people, and to just assume the best in other people, I think would also go a long way. But it's
Right.
kind of counterintuitive to the world in which we're living right now.
Yeah. And I think that face to face is so important, because it's so much easier to be unkind behind your
Mm,
screen when you're not looking the person in the eyes face to face.
yeah. Oh, yeah.
Right. When you're
Studies.
not
Oh,
seeing
yeah.
the impact of your words.
Hmm.
Yeah,
When you're
that's
not held accountable to that messy community, you don't feel a
right.
part of any community when you're anonymous, on
Right.
that screen to
Mhm.
great degree. And so that's the community. We need to build a community again, and we need to be thoughtful about it. And unfortunately, like, the community is not going to come through the technology. It can be a
Right.
piece of it, but mostly I see it as a roadblock that we've let get in our way, but we don't have to. I want to remind people, like, you do have a choice. You do have human agency. You can design and curate a life that is full and rewarding, and that there is room for these things in your life. And I think that's not the default anymore, and that's not our choice in many regards. Uh,
Mhm.
but to just exercise that, and to be intentional about community. That's something that's always been really important to me. It's important to you for sure. One thing I want to touch on that you mentioned about volunteering in the faith sphere, I think we're seeing a spiritual crisis in America right now. So I think it's good that you're in that sphere, that people are seeking meaning and purpose, because they're not getting it. They're not getting it. And that's another aspect or element of community that's just broken down to a great degree. And so we see a lot of these fissures and these breakdowns in traditional institutions that made our country a good and strong country. And we really need to really think about what those were, what
Mhm.
they are now, and what we want them to be in the future. So I think there's just so many different levels in which we live in interesting times, Mary. And it's all so
Yeah.
interconnected.
Absolutely, absolutely. I love that this has been a complete conversation. We haven't hit any of the normal questions that I ask, but I love that. I mean, it was a conversation. It was community, right? Building our
Yeah,
community.
yeah.
I see some definite ways we can partner as you
Oh,
transition to your new, your new name, your mission staying the same, of course. But I
mhm.
am going to end the podcast the same way I end all of our podcasts, Brenna, and that is by asking for a book recommendation. I never ask librarians or readers, tell me your favorite book, because it's
Yeah,
like saying which is your favorite child, or in
yeah,
my
you
case, which
can't
is your
answer
favorite
that.
dog. Other than I can't tell you which is my favorite dog. But what is a book that you've read that you've enjoyed sharing with people?
Yeah. So the last book I read, The CIA Book Club, it's by Charlie English, and it's nonfiction. It is literally about the book clubs that the CIA put together to win the hearts and minds of people during the Cold War. Because propaganda and all these things weren't working. What's fascinating about it is they didn't engage in censorship. They weren't sending over necessary specific books. What they discovered, that a desire for freedom and democracy and virtue just came from people who had the freedom to read broadly, because it opened up new possibilities. It sparked this innate desire in them to live in a free society. And so I just found that so uplifting, that they were just like, if the humanities are just allowed to do their thing without us pushing it in one direction or another, uh, human flourishing happens. And you can see that, like, that's proof of it. Like, this researcher went in and looked at the program and declassified documents and how it worked and what it did, and interviewed people who had been involved in it, part of the resistance, especially in Poland, and what that meant to them, what books meant to them. So for your library people, it's a validation of how important access to books, to all books, are, just to the human spirit. And so that, it was a hard read, because it's what human beings are capable of doing to one another is pretty horrific. But it was also a very deeply hopeful book, that you can come out of interesting times with your humanity intact.
I love that. And my to be read pile just grew.
Oh, I'm so sorry. If it's anything like mine.
No, that's okay. That's okay. I am. It's funny because I'm trying to find it. It's in my office today. So I always like to say that the state library, I'm here to serve, and so to make people feel comfortable, I just returned my overdue books that were lost in my house. But I picked up another book today. I think it's over in my bag, but it's a book about, ironically, written by a CIA operative. And so it's funny that here you're recommending another CIA book when I haven't really read about the CIA, and now I'm going to be reading 2 CIA books. But Brenna, I've so thoroughly enjoyed this conversation. I hope that people who listen to our podcast today, that this sparks a desire for community, for messy community, for conversation, for civil discourse. And I really hope that people find their way to the study and to study. I'm so excited to think about starting a study club and who's going to be in it and how am I going to do it. And I'll be honest, my study club might include virtual, because as state librarian, I have contacts in every state in the country. But wow, such an impact that you all are making on the world around you, one conversation at a time. And I love that. So thank you so much for joining me today.
Yeah,
And thank you, everyone that listened in, and look forward to a future Pathways Through the Prairie.